Hey guys, today we're in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 32. Now we are in this last section of Deuteronomy that I call Moses' last words and his death. And today we pick up a long chapter, but it's also a very unique chapter. As Moses is getting near to death, and Israel is getting near to the promised land, God commanded Moses yesterday in chapter 31 to write down a song and teach it to Israel. And so we would think that God is going to teach them a song of who He is and His faithfulness and His love, but instead this song that He's going to teach Israel is a song of basically how bad they are, how wrong they are. It's a prophetic song of what they're going to do in the future. Not under Moses, not necessarily under Joshua, but past that, hundreds of years following coming into the promised land. And so we'll kind of walk through this song and just pick up some things that I just want to point out. I encourage you to read it because it truly reminds us of who we are, right? As Christians this side of the cross, a lot of us and pastors will always quote, Romans 3:23, for we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that's exactly what God is teaching Israel, that just because they're about to get their socks blessed off by coming into the promised land, don't get too big for your britches, because you're still sinful, you're still going to mess up, you're still going to walk from me, and you need to be devoted to me. You need to make sure you know what you're doing. So let's jump into this. Chapter 32, starting with 1, it says, "Give ear, O heavens." He's asking Israel, and by saying heavens, all of creation, to listen to this song. This is the song that God gave him, and they need to listen up, right? He says, "May my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew." He's saying, may this nourish your heart, your soul. May this be good for you. Verse 4, we see a lot of descriptions of God. Moses praises who God is. He is the rock. He is perfect. He is justice. He is faithfulness. He is without sin. He is just. He is upright, right? God is holy, and they have dealt corruptly with him. This is once again prophetically talking about Israel. Israel, God is great. He's amazing. He's perfect. He's without sin. He is the rock. He is justice. He is faithful. He is all these things. But Israel will deal corruptly with him. Israel will turn their back on him. And what happens? Why do they do this? It says because they were blemish. Sin separates God and his people. We learned all the way back in the book Leviticus, holy and unholy cannot be in the same place. Sin separates. Moses says, "Is he not your father who created, who made you and established you?" Israel in their future will act as though they do not have a father. They will act as a fatherless nation, a godless nation. And Moses is saying, why are you going to do that? He is your father. Exodus 3 says that Israel is his firstborn son, right? But they're going to act as though they don't know their father. We see some Old Testament kind of remembrances of how good God is. Verse 8, when the Most High gave you the nations, their inheritance, and divided mankind, He fixed the borders of the people. He gave them an inheritance. He gave them the promised land. God fixed the borders of the people. This is going all the way back to the Tower of Babel. He spread out people so that they wouldn't be full of sin and obscure their way to God, but they would have a way to God. We found him in the desert land. God took care of them in the wilderness. Verse 13, he made them ride on the high places of the land. Israel could have had anything. There was a time where Israel was good, and that was the time before the promised land and taking over the promised land, but they will give that all up. Verse 15, you're going to see a weird name that you have not seen before. It says, but Jeshurun, which means the upright one, which is also a name of Israel. You will see this a few times throughout the Old Testament. It's just what we would call a nickname, right? So the upright one, Israel, they grew fat and they kicked. It says they kicked, it means they scorned, they hated God. You grew fat, stout, and sleek, and Israel forsake God who made him and scoffed at the rock of his salvation. Once again, going back to verse 4, the rock, the shelter, the keeper of the salvation. Israel got too big for their britches and said, basically, I scorn, I scoff, I kick at God. I don't need you for salvation. I can provide salvation on my own. It says they sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they have never known. It doesn't necessarily mean they worship demons. But we do know throughout the Old Testament, and even Paul talking a lot about it in 1 Corinthians and other letters, that demons would be behind the idols. As people worship false gods, it was an open place for demons to come in. For example, you're worshiping the golden cow and you're praying and you're worshiping and you want this. Well, demons have power. They can make things happen, so that person thinks that false god, that demon, that idol, that false god, that cow god did something, right? So they're worshiping that god, but it's really through the power of demons and Satan, and that's how they are getting in and leading them astray. So they were worshiping false gods. Let's see, verse 20, and he said, I will hide my face from them. Notice that God says, I will hide my face. I will give them no favor. I will give them no blessing. They will not see my glory. They will not be able to see any part of me. For they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faithfulness. They have no faith in God. And without faith, there is no salvation, right? Salvation is by faith and faith alone. So there is no salvation. Verse 23, I will heap disasters upon them, like hungers, like plague, like pestilence, like teeth of beasts, like venoms of things that will crawl. Swords shall be rave, and inside, and they shall have terrors on the inside. So we can see that God is going to truly haunt them and lead them in a way that is completely opposite of blessing, hopefully to get their attention to know that something is not right, but it will not. Verse 27, had I not feared a provocation by the enemy, lest their adversaries should misunderstand. He's talking about he's going to let countries come in and have their way with Israel. He said, but those countries are going to come in and think it's by their power. The adversaries will misunderstand. They will come in and say, oh, we did this. And God's saying, no, I allowed you to do this. I moved Assyria. I moved Babylon. I moved the Edomites. I did this. God's doing all this, but the enemies, the nations that do not know him, will think that they're doing it all along. 29, if they were wise, they would understand this. They would discern their latter end. God is saying, as Israel's walking through all of these bad things, they would think, where is this taking me, right? Where is the ultimate end goal for how we are living? And they would realize it's not a good end goal, and they would change their heart, but they do not. Verse 35, a verse that's often in Scripture, he says, vengeance is mine, for the time when their foot shall slip, and for the day of their calamity at hand, the Lord will vindicate his people. The word vindicate means judge. The Lord will judge his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there is none remaining, bond or free. So God is saying here that as they go bad in a way, God will punish them, God will remove them, but he will not remove them all the way. And we will see as we continue to read through the Old Testament, as God is kind of doing this, as we get into Judges, Kings, Chronicles, the prophets, we will see that God will save the small, a remnant, the faithful, the few. And that's what God is promising here. Verse 39, see now that I am He, and there is no God beside me. I kill, I make alive, I wound, I heal, and there is none that can deliver you out of my hand. God says, I have all the power. Right? I have full power and nothing can rescue you. Rejoice with him, O heavens. Know God is what he's saying. O bow to him, all gods, and he avenges the blood of his children. He takes vengeance on his adversaries. He repays those who hate him and cleanses or atones or gives atonement for his people's land. To those who are faithful, the Lord will save. He will give atonement. He will give purity to. We see in verse 46, Moses comes after the song and he tells them a few things. One, take to heart all the words. Right? So listen and respond. This is a song that Israel would have to remember. This is something they would sing so they would know that they're going to do wrong. So hopefully they would keep that on the forefront of their mind and they wouldn't do wrong, but they don't. For this is no empty word for you, but your very life. He's not saying, hey, this isn't just maybe. This is a message from God. God knows this is exactly what you're going to do. Israel, what are you going to do about it? And then we see on that same day, after Moses teaches the song to Israel, what happens? God comes to him and says, go up onto Mount Nebo and view the land of Canaan. You'll see in the thumbnail pictures of these YouTubes, you'll see a picture, and that was a picture I took just several months ago, back in March, of me and Laura standing on Mount Nebo at the place, or this soon place, where you can view all of Israel, all the Jordan River. You can see Jericho, you can see Jerusalem, you can see a lot of it. And so he takes Moses up to Mount Nebo and he can view the promised land. But he cannot go. Why? Because he broke faith with me and he did not treat me as holy. Going back to Numbers chapter 20, where Moses struck the rock twice. God told him once, he did it twice. A little out of anger, but once again, God said once, and Moses is saying that he needed to do it twice. He needed to give extra power. He did not have faith in God in striking it once. And so that's what happened. And that's why he is not allowed. For you are able to see the land before you, but you shall not go there. So we have here kind of winding up to the end. They taught a song. It's not a good song. It's not a song of marching and of hope, but it's a song of saying, Israel, you're going to fail. What are you going to do? Are you going to remain faithful or are you not? And this was a song to teach them of what is going to happen, to that maybe they would change and correct their way, but we will see as we read, Israel does not. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 33. God bless.